Amen. Please join me in our affirmations. We share the good news of God's love without favoritism. We meet both friend and adversary with forgiveness and grace.
In our hearts, we face the world with assurance and trust.
Take heart. Do not be afraid. God is with us wherever we go.
We are assured of God's presence and protection. We believe God's help is always available.
Let faith grow as doubts are explored. God invites us to follow new pathways.
We will listen for the Spirit's call. We will follow where God leads us.
Amen. The passage from this morning says that Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other sons. And Jacob had made for him a long or many-colored robe. And when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of his brothers, they hated him and couldn't even talk nicely to him. Sounds a little bit dysfunctional to me. Not a healthy family dynamic. This robe that was given to Joseph, though, it was a robe that was generally worn by princes and noblemen, not by shepherds, not by people who worked with their hands, because it had long sleeves that would cover parts of their hands, and that just wasn't conducive to a good day's work. So it was worn by men who didn't have to do such work in their lives. It was a status symbol. See, Joseph, he had always been tutored by his father, Jacob, to succeed him as the head of the tribe. The reason for this, well, there were several reasons for this, but one was that Joseph was the only one who showed the potential. He was the only one who had the intellectual capacity to do the job. Joseph was also a dreamer, and he had dreams that, when interpreted correctly, could be beneficial. These dreams could do things like predict the weather or predict upcoming conflicts with tribes, with other tribes. And one dream that Joseph had was that his family, all of his brothers, were bowing down to him at some point in the future. Now, Joseph, in his defense, he was 17 years old. He didn't understand yet that that's not something you just went around and told people, okay? Even if God gave you this dream and you knew for certain that it would be true, you would never go to the people that were in your dream saying, one day you are going to bow down to me. Because like any 17-year-old, this was something good that was going to happen for him, and he was excited about it. And he's saying, hey, guess what? Or like a lot of 17-year-olds I know nowadays, it starts with So anyway, I hear that a lot. So anyway, but Joseph had this dream, and he told his brothers, because that's what 17-year-olds do, and his brothers, it did not help their jealousy, and they became so sick of their little brother and so tired of their father's favoritism to Joseph that when they saw him coming, the brothers said to each other, here comes the big dreamer. Come on now, let's kill him and throw him into one of the cisterns, and we'll say a wild animal devoured him. Then we will see what becomes of his dreams. And they did throw him into the pit. But then Judah said to his brothers, let's not harm him because he is our brother, he is family. And they agreed. Instead, they sell him into slavery, which I suppose, compared to death, is a mercy. But the theme that grabs my attention here when I read this story is a phrase that I heard a lot growing up called the sins of the father. The sins of the father will be passed down for however many generations. The sins of the father is now known as generational trauma or generational curse. It is the patterns of behavior, the bad actions or mistakes the parents can make that negatively impact their children, and the consequences of those actions build patterns that are passed down from generation to generation. I mean, just look at Jacob. His childhood was filled with jealousy and competition with his older brother Esau. Their mother favored Jacob, their father favored Esau, and this rivalry led to Jacob actually stealing their father's blessing from Esau, and Jacob had to run for his life from his brother who was going to kill him. Dysfunctional family patterns are running abundant here. Jealousy and competition, the spirit of jealousy and competition within the family that Jacob's sons would inherit. Because Jacob's dysfunction didn't end there. Jacob wanted to marry a woman named Rachel. And he worked for 7 years for Rachel's father to earn her hand. And Rachel's father tricked Jacob into marrying the older daughter, Leah. And so Jacob had to work 7 more years to marry Rachel, the woman he actually loved. But even after Jacob finally got to marry Rachel, there was this dysfunctional competition over which woman would give Jacob the most sons. Leah gave Jacob sons. Leah's handmaiden gave Jacob sons. Rachel's handmaiden gave Jacob sons. I'm sure Jacob was he was complaining the whole time. In this situation, no man would ever want to be caught in a situation like this. But the rivalry between Leah and Rachel, it burned hotter and hotter and hotter. And finally, Rachel did bear Jacob a son. She had trouble getting pregnant, but she finally bore him a son who was none other than Joseph, who would one day own this Technicolor Dreamcoat. These brothers, all 12 of these brothers, were raised in this environment of competition and jealousy. Because you can bet that this rivalry between Jacob's wives was no secret. When you grow up in a household and you have a rivalry going on, or you have some members of the family who hold a grudge against other members of the family, the children know, y'all. It doesn't matter how much of a secret you try to keep it. The children know. They know what's going on. And the brothers were always competing, always vying for the favor that they wanted from their father, regardless of who their mother was. If I can just be good enough, my father will love me best, no matter what mother I have. But none of his sons could compare with Joseph, the firstborn of Rachel, the woman that Jacob loved. And so we're seeing 2 generations of familial dysfunction here that was just kind of passed down. These patterns that we don't even think about are inherited by our children. But the passage from this morning reminds us that it goes even further back. Let me remind you about Abraham, Jacob's grandfather. Abraham and his wife Sarah were old, and Sarah was barren. And when I say old, y'all, forgive me, they were past childbearing years. And Sarah was barren. She had always been barren. Yet God had promised them a son. The thing with God, though, is that they choose when the right time is to follow through on their promises. And us being human beings, when that time gets to be a little long, we start to doubt. Did I imagine this? Did God really mean it? Did God change their mind? Did I do something to make God change their mind? All kinds of doubts can run through our heads. But after 10 years, I would start to doubt a promise after 10 years, wouldn't y'all? 10 years of Sarah bearing no child. After that, she decided to take matter into her own hands. And just like Jacob's wives did, she gave her handmaiden Hagar to Abraham to impregnate so that Abraham would have a son to inherit all of his worldly goods. And Hagar gave birth to Ishmael. This made Sarah a little bit jealous. This made Sarah regret her decision immediately upon finding out that Hagar was pregnant, because Hagar was able to give Abraham what she could not. And there was jealousy and there was rivalry, and it was a house divided. 14 years after Ishmael was born, so 24 years after God had promised Sarah and Abraham a son, Sarah gave birth to Isaac. And the jealousy that Sarah felt toward Hagar and Ishmael, and not only that, but now the worry that Ishmael might try to take some of her son's inheritance, led Sarah to demand that Abraham turn the handmaiden and the child away, to send them off to die in the desert. To send them off to die in a desert. Joseph's brothers put him in a dry pit to die. The symmetry in a lot of these generational stories is staggering when you pay attention, because it's all the same dysfunctional patterns. So Hagar and Ishmael are sent off to the desert to die, but God sends an angel to care for them. And this angel promises that Ishmael's descendants are going to be made into a mighty nation, just like Isaac's. When Joseph's brothers are trying to figure out what to do with him, after they decide not to kill him, some Midianite traders pass by. Midianites are the descendants of Ishmael. And the original family rivalry comes full circle, because Ishmael was sent away to deny him his inheritance, and now Ishmael's descendants are showing up and taking Joseph away from his inheritance. Generational dysfunction, it comes in many forms. It comes in many, many forms, and we can see the patterns going through the generations of Abraham's descendants and Abraham's family. But the big question is, how do we stop it? How do we put a stop to this generational dysfunction? How do we break the patterns that we so often follow without even realizing what we're doing? I remember being a child and swearing I would never do some of the things that I saw adults doing in my adulthood. And when I became an adult, guess what happened? And I didn't even see it, y'all. I didn't even realize it, because that's what we're human, and we follow. Monkey see, monkey do. It's how we grow. It's how we develop. But the answer to how we break the patterns is given to us here and in the rest of Joseph's story. Joseph was removed. Granted, he was forcibly removed from his familial dynamics, but that action gave him the time that he needed to think about his family, to think about why his brothers acted the way they did. It gave him time to heal from the betrayal and to forgive his brothers. Not only to forgive his brothers, but by the end of Joseph's story, he is actually saving their very lives during a time of drought and famine. They come to Egypt. By that time, Joseph has gotten a place of great esteem. He's the Pharaoh's right-hand man. Okay, he goes from being a slave in Egypt to being the Pharaoh's right-hand man, because he had God behind him and because he was just an awesome kind of guy. And his brothers show up from Canaan because there's drought and famine. They had heard that there was food in Egypt, and Joseph recognized them, and he had mercy upon them. He forgave them, and he gave them food to take back to their father Jacob. He saved their lives. This time in Egypt gave him time away to heal and to forgive and to figure things out. What the brothers intended for ill, God worked it for Joseph's good. And that dream did come true. They did bow down to him because they didn't recognize him. He had grown. He was 17 years old the last time they had seen him. But he had grown, and he was in Egyptian regalia. Joseph was removed from his family's dynamic. Now, there are times today where, granted, you hear about more and more people removing themselves from their family because it's simply healthier. And some people do that. But there are times when we stay together instead. But whether you stay or whether you go, Whichever path you choose, it is imperative that you do a few things. Whether you stay with your family or whether you go, it is imperative that you give yourself time to look at the patterns that you unconsciously follow. This usually includes some form of therapy, because there is a point of view that a third person can give you that you will never see for yourself. You must give yourself time to look at the patterns you unconsciously follow. You must give yourself grace for the times that you fail to break those patterns. And you must do the work of dealing with your own hurts so that you recognize the patterns so that they don't rule you. You rule them. And that is how you break them. That is how you do not hand them down to your own children. And this can be a lifetime process. But the good news is that even if you don't get it quite right, even if you still cause harm to your children while the work is getting done, because you don't know what you don't know until you know it. Amen? Even if there is harm done, if your children see you working on yourself and they see the good habits that you are doing to work on yourself, then guess what? They will do the same. Just as they will repeat the harmful patterns, the dysfunctional patterns, if you don't do the work, so they will follow the good habits and the good patterns that you do to recognize things and to use your words and to speak things out and to speak things aloud and to understand that beneath any kind of tension, any kind of rivalry, any kind of competition that you have going on in your family, underneath of that is the love, the foundational love and trust that God has given to you as a family to begin with, to build upon. When your children see you working, they will do the same, and that is how you will help not only yourself, but your children and all of the generations that will come after you. God does not want to see us struggle in unhealthy generational patterns. And as a part of the journey to enter the kingdom of heaven, part of that journey is to forgive past hurts. It is to forgive past hurts, and it is to leave dysfunctional patterns and dysfunctional patterns and dysfunctional habits that do not serve us for good. To leave things behind that do not serve us and to move forward to a future where we all care for one another as a part of God's bigger family. Amen. If you will rise as you are able, we will sing hymn 695.